Anna, I've mentioned it's an incredible event. It's a bit like, or it feels a bit like, something like the 1904 Tour de France with bells on, doesn't it, really? I mean, this is going back to the beginnings of what bike racing was, man or woman and machine against the elements. Is that really the essence of what this is?
Yeah, when Michael envisioned and sort of created this race, that was definitely his inspiration and his intention, yeah.
And is it daunting when you see the route every year? I mean, does it get your juices? Does it look enticing or daunting?
For sure, this year looks really enticing. It's one of these things, the more you do these races, you learn from them, and it becomes less daunting. I mean, for me, TCR was my first ultra-endurance race. And I remember back then, I was so green to it, I didn't know what I was getting into.
Here's the route. What do we think? I mean, it's just, in a way, it doesn't really matter where it goes, does it? It's just going to be really, really hard.
In some respects, the route's totally irrelevant because the feelings are going to be the same. It's going to be the same kind of like suffering, you've got to manage yourself the same way. And you're going from kind of east to west, so you know it's going to get kind of slightly more rugged the further east you get through Europe. So the route kind of, obviously, it creates a lot of kind of interest and focus. But actually the checkpoints, like the interesting stuff happens in between when no one's watching.
Yeah, we'll get onto that, definitely. Unsupported, mentioned that at the start, Anna. In real terms, again, we're sort of going back to how cycling was a long, long time ago when riders had to sort themselves out, couldn't have any outside assistance at all. What does that mean in the modern day, realistic, unsupported? In real terms, what does that involve?
Okay, so the idea is that riders can access any services, such as sort of food or accommodation, that any other rider could access. So you can't access anything. So for example, if you're riding, maybe the race goes through your hometown and you know your family could be there, you shouldn't be sort of going home and accessing like your own bed or food from your family, because could the other riders access that?
What happens like if you're in the Alps and your forks break and you go to the forge, can someone help you with the bellows? Is it back like the famous story in the Tour de France, Eugene Crissac?
Yeah, we're not quite that strict, but so somebody could man the bellows, but yeah, you can get your mate to sort that for you.
And this is a race of relatively few rules, it seems.
Yeah, we have 10 rules, just 10 rules, but the last rule's quite all-encompassing.
What's the first rule? Keep going forever and a day, and
yeah,
until you can't go anymore. Yeah, but what are the 10 sort of rules that everyone has to abide by with it? I mean, it sounds as if it sort of simplifies it. I mean,
it's a good test to see how many we can remember now, isn't
yeah.
it?
I mean, the big one is Rule 10, which is ride in the spirit of self-sufficiency and equality. So, don't cheat. That's basically it.
Yeah, I mean, that's always going to be something, though, isn't it? In whatever event, people aren't doing this for money, though, are they? Is that the biggest thing that you hope means that it limits the amount of skullduggery out on the road? Because people aren't doing it for financial gain, are they?
No, there's some prizes, but there's no sort of cash prize. I guess there's that, and then there's, I don't know, we just hope that everyone's in it for the right reasons, that they respect each other and as they would wish to be respected themselves.
Talk to me about your role coming in and what the big attraction for you is in being involved in this race, and in what way you are involved in it.
Yeah, thanks, Simon. I mean, first of all, I think, there's those of us that dream and those of us that do, and I put myself in the former, would probably dream of doing this one day, but probably live my dreams through the efforts of others. It's great to see so many people in this room. It's packed, and it's been interesting to watch the community around this event, Transcontinental, grow, and it's not the only event in the world doing ultra distance, but it's certainly, I think, the blue ribbon event that people aspire to, and it's great to be part of the Rouleur event here with it. And our relationship, so I represent a bicycle brand, Kinesis UK, which many of you hopefully know. We've got a bike on display here, but the relationship with the race really comes through this guy, Mike Hall, who we met sort of randomly through some 24-hour mountain bike races when I was supporting in other ways. And Mike sort of impressed me personally with his sort of ambition to do lots of long-distance rides, and I wasn't quite sure why someone would want to do so many, but it was sort of either a condition of his, but it was certainly an ambition of his to get quite good at them. And he did. He got really quite good at them. These were 24-hour mountain bike races originally, and this was before he certainly announced Transcontinental, but and we just sort of started a journey together as friends, and he was very humble, and those of you that knew Mike or knew of his stories, he's the most humble person. I think for us as a brand, it's nice to support cycling, of course, but also it's just great to align yourself with people that want to go on this journey. And we watched Mike build an event with Anna and the team behind it to allow this incredible journey to take part for everybody, whether you're watching or whether you're supporting or whether you're actually racing. And I think it's way bigger than the people just racing. And there's this sort of morbid fascination. And as Grim, we've heard lots of references from Josh already and the others about how hard it is, but somehow we're all a little bit fascinated about how far we can take ourselves. Mike was, and we're interested in how far people can take themselves, as well on the products we design for that. So it's a nice association, and it's a really sort of long-term project.
Josh, what is it about ride, eat, sleep, repeat that appeals to you? Because that's what it seems like.
Well, it's quite simple. It says it all in the name, doesn't it? It's nothing to think about. Just get on your bike, ride, and, the life's simple. All you've got to do is, it's almost like you go back to like your basic human instincts. We're essentially kind of animals, for want of a better term. And when you're doing that, you're just traveling along, you're looking for accommodation, looking for shelter, food, water. It's almost like you hit your basic human instincts, and it just feels so right when you're doing it. It's kind of dressed up as a bike race, but when you're there and you're in it and you get absorbed and there's nothing else, no other care in the world for 7, 8, 9, 10 days, I think it just feels so right.
Anna, you've got 4 navigational points, 4 checkpoints over 4,000 kilometres of route. How on earth do you keep tabs on everybody all the time for the rest of the time? There's a lot of time when they're not necessarily being checked on.
Well, they each carry a GPS tracker, so that has to be on all the time. They can't switch that off. So we have a team of dot watchers, we call them. They're volunteers, and they have eyes on a number of riders.
Looking for any suspicious sudden GPS movements, watching the dots? Yep,
so if anything, if they're going uphill faster than they should be, then, we need to pay attention to that. If drafting, you can tell if 2 riders are riding together for more time than they ought to be, so, yeah.
Nikki, route planning and navigation seems absolutely key to this. Is not half the battle, but a key part of it before you even start, knowing exactly what you're going to do and what your plan is.
Yeah, I don't think you can actually spend too much time route planning. You look at the scale of the challenge, it's a monumental thing to take on the race itself. But half the challenge is, planning the route. And during the race, you can waste so much time if you've not spent enough time on your navigation choices. Just trying to reroute on the fly, it can really take up a lot of time.
I mean, do you spend half the winter sitting there looking at studying maps, trying to work out the best way?
Absolutely, yeah.
And you're not allowed to draft, are you? You've got to sort of keep away from each other.
You can actually enter as a pair, so
right.
the only way that you could draft, obviously, if you're racing as a pair, you can draft behind each other, do a 2 up for 4,000 kilometres.
As you do.
Not my. Personally, I've always done races as a solo entrant, but yeah, I think racing as a pair has a completely different set of challenges.
Ben, is the reality, though, that most of you are on the same road? You pick the same route in the end, or not?
No, not at all.
Really?
So day one, you're sort of, because you're all setting off from the same place at the same time.
When you're all fresh and keen and raring to go.
Exactly. Then you generally see some people. But as soon as you get into the race, it's very rare, from my experience, that you actually see people. Around the checkpoints that Anna's got across Europe, there is a little parkour that's maybe 40, 100 kilometers that everyone takes. But because all of the routing between the checkpoints and parkours is down to you, there's so many options, you very rarely see anyone, either from the field completely spreading out or from just complete different choice of routes. So yeah, very rare that you see people.
Josh, how difficult is it to judge when to take a bit of a break and to not just push yourself that little bit too far? Because your desire always has to be, presumably, to push on because the clock never stops. But presumably you have to get a balance in there somewhere, don't you? Because this thing goes on for days. I mean, how many days does it take normally for the winner? About 9 or 10 days, something like that?
Yeah, the point end of the race is 8 to 9 days, and then you can take anything up to 2 weeks.
So you do have to get a balance, don't you, somewhere?
That's key. It's all about management. And to be honest, it's not really about your athletic ability. Obviously, that makes a massive difference, but you can overcome sort of your physical strength by just being organised. So it's all about managing your food, like hydration, sleep, your mental state. Because if you crack mentally, it doesn't matter how strong you are, you'll lose so much more than just sort of being level-headed. And I think that's why you find it takes a couple of attempts for people to do really well, and win these events. You can't, it's not one of those things you can just rock up and win it because you've won a road race or something. It takes time to learn it, learn your body, learn how you respond under pressure, because you're sleeping 2, 3, 4 hours a night, and it kind of does weird stuff to you, and you've got to understand that, what's happening when that weird stuff starts happening.
How do the three of you sort of judge it? Do you have different strategies, or do you all work by the same sort of idea that whatever happens, no matter how I'm feeling, once I've done X amount of kilometres in this day, I am going to stop, I am going to rest at this point? Or is sometimes the temptation to push on, or would that be a bad thing to do? Would that come back to haunt you later?
Personally, I think it's, if you try and set a certain target of, say, 200-300k a day, if you don't meet that, then you can start getting into a negative spiral. So I just sort of go on timings, So go to bed at, I don't know, between 12 and midnight, sleep 2-3 hours, ride through, have a breakfast, then a lunch, then an evening meal, and then get back round again. And if you do 400k in a day, that's brilliant. If you do 100k in a day,
do you like the casual way he says that? You do 300 or 400.
It's amazing though, yeah, but when you think about it, you go out for a 100k bike ride, what's that, 3-4 hours maybe? But if you're riding a bike 18 hours a day, even if you're going slower, you're just going to cover the ground. So it sounds like a big distance, but the reality is if you drove your car really slowly at 30 miles an hour every day, like all day non-stop, you cover a big distance. And as long as you're kind of fueling yourself, keeping going on a bike, you're not doing 30 miles an hour, but you're ticking over, even 10 miles an hour, and you ride, 12, 15 hours. That's 150 miles, and that's the kind of average speed you can do in the mountains.
And this is an amateur event. How much training do you have to do? I mean, one imagines that you need to spend an awful lot of time on the bike to prepare for an effort such as this, but do you have do you have regular work as well? I mean, presumably you must do.
Yeah, the motive behind the race is not the prize money, because there isn't any at the end of the day. I've got a full-time job. I think most people who enter have a full-time job.
But how do you fit all of that in? I mean, how much time? How much?
I have no social life.
But how much time are you spending on the bike, and what sort of hours is your job? I mean, this is an extraordinary thing to take on, isn't it?
I think it's partly about having a very understanding employer. So my employer sort of knows the things that I get up to outside of work. And so they're quite understanding in that respect. If I ask for 3 weeks off at a time to go and do this race next year, they'll be quite happy for me to have that. But it's also about just trying to fit in the training around work. So, using the commute to work, it's just very much about time management, actually, at the end of the day.
And that's a good skill for the race itself as well. Because if you can get organised and do the training and fit it around life, and you're busy all the time, when it comes to the race and you're just riding every day, it's almost easier. But
Not so easy to fit it all in, though, is it? Especially, you know, as the nights draw in. Although, again, good practice for you when you're in the actual event.
But this is the thing, really. It comes back to you've really got to want to do it. You've got to love doing it. And I think we'd all probably say we just love being on the bike. So, I mean, I work full-time, so 40, 50 hours a week. And then combining the bike on top of that, I'm exhausted at points, but that's the bit I love. So you can sort of build through a year, and it's all very cyclical around.
But how does it work for you? Are you out on the bike at 4 o'clock in the morning before you go to work every day?
I try not to that side of the day, but more in the evening. But yeah, for sure. And then the weekends, you can sort of build in a clock off on a Friday and get out into the hills and do a bit of bivvy out there. And yeah, it's really easy to sort of rack up some hours.
I think part of the training strategy is being able to do multi-days, back-to-back days, you know, long days in the saddle, 8 hours, three days in a row. So part of my build-up would be to take Fridays off and then just use that weekend block to go off and do a bikepacking adventure. And I might spend like 30 hours on the bike over those 3 days.
Question to all three of you, actually. What is the biggest attraction of this sort of cycling for you? Is it knowing that you're pushing yourselves to the limit and getting the maximum out of yourselves? Is it the scenery, the self-sufficiency? What is it that really attracts you to this and makes you put yourself through something which clearly is an extremely difficult test of endurance?
there's probably no one thing, but it's a combination of everything. You know, you're out there, you're seeing the world, you see sort of 7, 8, 9 countries in a week. That's a pretty cool thing to do. You know, you're traveling through these countries and you're not a tourist, you're just at, human level. You go into a shop when you're hungry in the middle of, Bosnia, somewhere you probably wouldn't go to on holiday, and you're just a person passing through. You get a real kind of appreciation of the culture and a real kind of human understanding of people. Plus there's, you're riding a bike all week. That's kind of a cool thing to do. And you meet like loads of like-minded people. It's kind of something you probably don't fully understand until you've done it. But it's definitely worth trying just to, you'd get it. I mean, you go to you finish the TCR and everyone there is kind of, they've been through the same things. They've experienced very similar things. And there's an instant bond. It doesn't matter whether you came first or last. Everyone kind of understands it because you've all kind of, been through it together.
And how many times a day do you think, I can't do this anymore, I'm going to have to stop?
Normally around lunchtime.
Nikki, was your first involvement volunteering on the race a few years ago? Am I right in saying that?
That was 2016, TCR number 4.
So how did you get involved in that? How did that come about?
I'd already heard about the race a couple of years before, so I was just sort of following the race. I just got a bit hooked on it, this idea of travelling across Europe as fast as you can go on 2 wheels. But sort of, I didn't have the confidence to actually enter the race, so I thought the next best thing is like a stepping stone would be first to volunteer on the race at one of the checkpoints. So just really get an insight into what the race is all about from the organisation point of view.
So you already had the idea that you would actually do it at some point in the future beyond that?
It was sort of like a 2-year plan. I'll volunteer this year, and I have my own adventure actually. So I volunteered at the 4th checkpoint in Montenegro, which we will be going back to next year, so that's very exciting.
Yeah, can we just get the route up once again, if possible, so we can have a little look at the route for the next Transcontinental.
We'll be revisiting the Durmitor National Park in Montenegro for checkpoint 3, so which is the checkpoint that I volunteered at in 2016.
But when you see the map and it brings back memories of Montenegro, are Are they all happy ones for you?
All happy memories, because I wasn't actually racing then. I was just sort of like, you know, soaking it all up and just having a fantastic time seeing all the different people who were coming through.
And how about you? I mean, we go to the Czech Republic, is that right? Next year, Ben, you've experience of that before?
Yeah, Anna told me earlier that I do. It's one of these things, when you do, you pass through so many different countries and places when you're doing these races, and you're sort of...
and you haven't had any sleep.
Pushing yourself, you're dealing with fatigue, and it's one of these things that you don't necessarily take everything in as you're going, but for me personally, I always sort of put at the back of my mind there's certain places that I want to come back to. And we did go through Czech Republic a few years ago. There was one of the CPs was on the Polish border in 2017, I think it was, and it was one of Anna's challenging checkpoints. So it was on the Polish border on top of a mountain, and basically there was two routes that you could get there. You could either go up the mountain, down the mountain. I should say as well, there was a parkour here as well. So you would have had to have done a repeat of this mountain, or you could go around the back side of the mountain. But yes. So we'll be going back to the Czech Republic, and that'll be really exciting, I'm sure.
When you're setting up the route each year, I mean, obviously you cover an enormous amount of ground. Are there certain countries that are much easier to deal with than others?
Not really.
Do you have favourites?
Well, we're starting back in Geraardsbergen again, and that's a place that has been a real, it's so easy to work with the town there. They love having us there, and I think the atmosphere at the start, we have this sort of torches line. We do it at night. We start at night, so that and the town give everyone torches, so everyone watching lines the Muur, and that is it's a pretty magical experience. Yeah, so it's hard to beat that one.
Are people made aware of the route going along? Do you sometimes have people at the roadside, or are you genuinely in the middle of nowhere most of the time?
Most of the time you're on your own, but for sure people do come out, and it's one of these really weird things. You might be sitting outside of a supermarket or going down some random road, and someone will shout your name. What the hell's going on? It's really sort of out of the ordinary, but there's followers across Europe, and it is amazing. And it's really welcoming when you get to some place in sort of the back of beyond, and someone knows who you are and what you're doing. It's really nice.
When I was doing the preparation for this, your name was linked with the Czech Republic, your name was linked with Montenegro, and yours was with the Alps. Would that be right? More familiar territory for most of us?
Well, yeah, I've done TCR twice. The first year, there was a checkpoint on Stelvio, and the second year, I can't remember. We went through the Alps, I think.
You did Sestria, didn't you?
Sestria, yeah, because the first checkpoint was Ventoux, so yeah. So it was a bit flatter that year by TCR standards.
Do you have an abiding memory of previous editions? Is there one moment where you look back on it and you think, I don't know, whether you're being chased by a massive dog up a valley or something, I don't know, something that stands out that you wouldn't necessarily expect,
So, I mean, I've got a day that just stands out as one of my best days on a bike. Back in 2019, there was a CP at the bottom of the Alpe d'Huez, but to get there was a parkour that ultimately meant you climbed the Glibier. You did the Alpe d'Huez from sort of the backside, but on a winding gravel track up to the top.
So it made you work for it then to get it and find it?
Yeah, absolutely. And then you drop down the sort of the famous hairpin bend road to the checkpoint at the bottom. And I just remember dropping down that road at sunset, and it was light enough that you could take everything in. CP at the bottom, and then this incredible, I can't even remember what the road was called, but it was a balcony road, a little narrow road with a massive drop off to one side, and loads of rocky tunnels the whole way up. And I climbed that in the pitch black, in the cold. It was just stunning. And I think that day I can't even remember how much altitude we climbed that day, but that's a real standout for me.
Yeah, so, and Nikki, do you find there are moments when you can appreciate it, despite the lack of sleep, despite everything?
I think one of the main moments is sunrise. So, like, you know, you've made it through the night, and the night can be such a, it's sort of stretches out, it's such a long slog. If you've been riding all night and just riding into the sunset, it's always sort of that renewed sense of hope, and you always get a burst of energy when, you know, the sun comes up and you really do get another kick. So that's one of my best times of the day, to be honest.